Hello, everyone. Thanks to Josh and the Tidelift crew for having me here at Upstream. Before we get started, I want to let you know that you can access the slides and speaker notes directly at bit.ly/upstream-social-model. And apparently, bit.ly links are case sensitive, so all of that is lowercase. My name is Julia Ferraioli, and I actually just recently joined Cisco's Open Source Programs Office. I've been working in and or around open source for a couple of decades now, doing everything from research to engineering to program management to really whatever needs to be done. I am your standard open source Swiss Army knife. I also co-founded Open Source Stories with Amanda Kazari, who you probably heard speak about the importance of thoughtfully measuring and recognizing contributions earlier today. I'm going to talk about how to look at the fundamentals of open source that many, if not most of us, interact with regularly through a slightly different lens. That lens is what I'm calling the social model of open source. And sneak peek, has to do with social dynamics. That's a shock, I know. When we think about open source, we probably all have different ideas of what it means to us. I have a laundry list of words that come to mind whenever someone asks me what open source is, and it varies wildly depending on who I am talking to at the time. You can't work in an open source programs office, or OSPO for short, without becoming a little bit of a licensing nerd, or a lot of a licensing nerd in some cases. But the license isn't what first occurs to me. It's what I consider to be the paperwork of open source, the criteria that you have to satisfy in order to technically be open source. But I don't see the license as its heart. When I think of open source, some words that immediately pop up in my head are ones like philosophy, education, research, collaboration, innovation, activism, community, and more. We likely all have different reasons for getting involved in open source, and that influences what word cloud we have in our heads. Some of us may have gotten frustrated with the limitations of proprietary software. Others may have wanted to collaborate with friends, accelerate the development of a new idea, get a new job, find people with similar interests. And more, some people have found it to be their default way of working. It's what they've always known. It's pretty cool. Whatever motivated you to join this ecosystem, you help make it the multifaceted and dynamic place it is today. Plus, you get to know that your efforts have wide-ranging effects throughout the world. There are very few industries now that aren't touched in some way by open source. And that's kind of mind-blowing. But what is open source? Well, there's no one right answer. But I think that part of the answer is that it's a collection of relationships. Some of them are bidirectional, Some of them are parasocial, more one-sided. I tried to represent this with a graph, a mixed multigraph to be precise, with directed and undirected edges going between a bunch of nodes. This is how it appears to me in my head, anyway. But you'll notice that all of the nodes have the same shape, and that's not right. It's way more complicated than that. While we are all open source humans in this room, relationships in open source aren't just between humans. They're also between companies, nonprofits, universities, foundations, governments, utilities, and more. It's a complex system, but I think that's what makes it so terribly fascinating. It's what keeps me around, anyway, and it's great for talks like these. So how do we, as colleagues in this open source community, recognize these different relationships, these different needs, and their dynamics? It's part of what prompted me to explore developing this social model of open source. And to do that, it means asking ourselves, what do we owe each other? And I think that it comes down to three primary components: empowerment, transparency, and kindness. I've thought about it a lot, and those are the ones that keep sticking around. So let's dig into them. Open source is all about empowerment, empowering us with the ability to learn from others, to use and modify code, to accelerate development. And luckily, it's easier than ever before to get people the information that they need to be successful within your project. But there is still room for improvement. Let's take a look at a few ways. Documentation. Most widely used projects have started or have made good progress to emphasize the importance of documentation. And tools like Doxy help projects jumpstart their own technical docs. We've come a long way since the API references and Java docs. Still, documentation isn't a one-size-fits-all sort of thing. It's critical to break out different sets of documentation for our different audiences. You can break it down by use case. What is the person trying to do with your project? It may be that you've got kind of a kitchen sink sort of project, and people may want to do a bunch of different things. Can you help them identify the primary use cases and guide them through that? Break it down by the level of expertise, not only in terms of their experience within the wider ecosystem, but also within your project. Make sure that the beginners can get going rapidly, and that the power users don't walk away from your docs thinking they're too simple. And potential contributors need development documentation so that they can be effective within the project and reduce the load on you, the maintainer. Potential adopters also need to understand how to evaluate the project and its position within the wider ecosystem. That one's I threw in for free. It's not on there. Guidance. As projects grow more complex, and they're growing more and more complex by the hour, figuring out how to get help within them also gets harder. Different projects may use different issue trackers, have different norms for reporting issues, and even have different mechanisms for filing issues versus ideas for enhancements versus requests for help. Wherever a project takes reports of issues and discusses them, empower your community by being very explicit about where and how they should go about it. As a side benefit, it lowers costs for maintainers by reducing the amount of redirection and clarification that they need to do. Where does the community go to support each other? With the absolute proliferation of ways to communicate, and the pandemic has made this so much worse, where do we go? Do we go to Slack, IRC, Discord, mailing lists? Lots of projects these days link to their official channels, but calling out unofficial ones as well can help people connect with each other and encourage the growth of a healthy community. We can further help our community by giving them guidance on which channels to use for different topics. Where can I go to post memes? Brainstorm ideas for a side project using yours. Where can I go to say, I've got this incomprehensible error message. I have no idea what to do, and Google has entirely failed me. It's very much a help us help each other sort of situation. And the same goes for meetups as well. Just because you're not running the meetup or conference doesn't mean that you shouldn't encourage it. Let's talk about transparency. We talk about transparency being a benefit for open source, but usually in the context of code. It extends far beyond that, though. Open source projects that clearly articulate how they operate give their community the social frameworks that they need to be effective within the project. Many people are familiar with the transparency that comes with having a well-defined governance model, but there's more that projects can do to be transparent to their community. As more companies start to create open source as part of their strategy, product strategy, branding strategy, whatever strategy, it can create some tension between the person who is working on a project with people around the world for no compensation, and the people who are getting paid to do it. There's some skepticism there. When a project is run by a company or an individual, decisions about the future of the project can become opaque to the other. There are benefits and detractors on both sides. But by being upfront and identifying the affiliation of a project, whether it be a company, government, nonprofit, or individual, you allow consumers to make informed decisions based on their own strategy and values. It allows people to judge for themselves whether they see a potential conflict of interest coming down the line. If they trust you to sustain the project, to invest in it, and if it fits their own risk profile. Do they see you relicensing down the line? Oh no, I wasn't going to say license after that one slide. I'm going to move on. Let's talk about the transparency of funding. As one of the co-founders of Open Source Stories, I'm acutely aware of how expensive it is to maintain an open source project. Believe me, I know. There are more and more ways to accept funding for your project, from Open Collective to GitHub sponsors to Patreon and more. But from the outside, it's kind of hard to know when a project is adequately funded. When thinking about transparency, be transparent about your funding needs, how much of that is met, and where it is coming from. This allows people and companies who allocate funding to be smart about it and judge for themselves when a project is over or underfunded. It also helps potential adopters understand if a project is financially sustainable and stable, and when you need help. If no one knows that your funding is ending or has ended, they can't step up. So this is as much for your benefit as for theirs. I know that money and talking about money is uncomfortable, but we don't make it more comfortable by not talking about it. Last, but arguably the most important, is kindness. Kindness is an interesting one to throw in there, isn't it? It's hard to tie kindness directly back to the functionality of a project, or its security, or reliability, or resiliency. But it's critical to sustaining the community that makes it tick. It's how we get people to stick around, how we get them to stay involved, and be excited about spending their time with us. But it's also the most nebulous and hand-wavy. We want people to have empathy for each other, though that's near impossible to quantify. Good communication practices such as constructive code reviews and other norms can help people feel welcome. Mentorship or apprenticeship programs are an act of kindness themselves by showing newcomers the ropes and investing in their success. Recognizing all types of contribution, not just code, using something like all contributors, signals that you value them, and they should keep doing a great job. How do you make it formal, though? I couldn't end this talk without talking about a code of conduct. Codes of conduct aren't a set of rules that you must abide by, or else you get kicked out of the open source pool, though. In fact, Josh said it best. A code of conduct is a restorative tool that clarifies the ground that we are all standing on when we are together. It's all about helping people understand what you expect from them and how we can move forward as a community when things break down. How can we resolve conflict? A code of conduct is a tool of kindness and of empowerment. That brings us full circle in our social model of open source. What do we owe each other? It's not too terribly complex, is it? It's what we probably want from each other in general. Empowerment, transparency, and kindness. Before we go, though, I'd like to touch on the importance of data portability. While many open source maintainers already point their community to resources like issue trackers or contributing paths, much of how people find this information is baked into the platforms that we use to host our projects. Hosts like GitHub and GitLab do a great job of surfacing this information. We have come a long way from my first experience with using open source and emailing around tar GZ files. That said, I would push you all to not rely upon the host to organize and present this information, at least not exclusively. There will likely be a time when you decide to use a different issue tracker, when your discussion platform changes, when you decide to self-host your project's source of truth. Technology is not fixed. So think about how we can codify the details of what make up empowerment, transparency, and kindness into the project itself. And now I will stop just shy of suggesting adding yet another YAML file to your repo. Hopefully, this different, though as yet incomplete, lens helps reframe the importance of highlighting the social constructs that make open source possible. Let's make open source a good place to be. Thanks, everyone.